Alrighty. Shit. Jesus.
By now, most of you have probably heard of the hit new game AFK Arena. So who are the top 3 AFK Arena heroes?
One of the most arresting images ever seen in the media was the photograph of a Buddhist monk setting himself on fire on a busy road in Saigon in 1963. His act of what's called self-immolation was in protest against how Buddhists were treated by the South Vietnamese government. An American journalist named David Halberstadt witnessed the burning monk with his own eyes. He later wrote, "Flames were coming from a human being. His body was slowly withering and shriveling up, his head blackening and charring. In the air was the smell of burning human flesh. Human beings burned surprisingly quickly. But what is perhaps more surprising are these words. As he burned, he never moved a muscle, never uttered a sound, his outward composure in sharp contrast to the wailing people around him. It was as if the monk was able to control his pain completely. How did this monk achieve the state of calm and seemingly become impregnable to the pain of burning? We have all burned our hands on something before we know how much that hurts. Until the nerves are dead, the pain a person feels from being burned is intense, to say the least. But the monk who set himself on fire was an extreme circumstance, and today we're looking into whether smaller events that involve pain can be controlled. For instance, what about when an evil infection in your tooth has created a pocket of pus that causes an intense toothache? Some of you will know how that feels, and might have wanted to perform some ad hoc surgery and knock out your own tooth to stop the pain. But imagine that you could just eliminate the pain, or at least manage your own brain in a way that you could handle it. The same goes for chronic backaches, broken bones, ingrown toenails, the humming and throbbing caused by an insect bite. Could you really avoid all these aches and pains using only your mind? In 2011, researchers in the USA wanted to get to the bottom of pain management and meditation.
Fucking
They were researching
idiot.
monks who had devoted a lifetime to meditation, but ordinary people. According to NPR, the neuroscientists who led this study took normal, healthy individuals and asked them to attend 4 sessions on mindfulness and meditation. They then subjected those people to pain by burning their legs. The outcome of the study was that the subjects reported less intensity of pain after the sessions, and measurements of brain activity showed that the parts of the brain that normally lit up in response to pain were less active. The conclusion was that meditation might help people deal with pain, and that you don't have to be a Buddhist monk to reap the benefits. But that's not totally blanking out pain. It's just a slight reduction in pain. So how do we get to the point that we can almost eliminate pain completely? We found a scientific paper online called Pain Sensitivity and Analgesic Effects of Mind. Mindful states and Zen meditators, a cross-sectional study. In this study, non-meditators joined a group of seasoned meditators, and they were all subjected to varying levels of pain, sometimes intense. Unsurprisingly, the meditators reported experiencing less pain, and the scientists believe this was related to how they managed to slow their respiratory rate. A former student of Vipassana meditation explained that when someone is asked to sit in the lotus position for many hours a day, that the position alone can be very painful. He talks about being hit by an arrow, in that first there's pain of the piercing of the skin, and after that there's the emotional pain that follows. He said monks will observe the first pain and then ignore the second emotional response. A trained monk might be able to sit and feel pain, observe it, but then accept it. They don't react to it emotionally. They cut off all attachment to the emotional disassociate yourself enough to cut off your emotional attachment to pain doesn't sound like the kind of thing most people can do. But we wanted to know more, so we looked online at forums where this kind of meditative pain management was discussed. Many people who had been students of meditation said they didn't think they could get to a state where they felt no pain at all when it should be extreme. We did find one person who said he'd practiced Zen meditation for 26 years and said, "I've actually had a crown done without Novocaine, using meditation alone." Wow, meditation master or masochist? If we take him at his word, then it seems even a novice can use meditation to lessen pain, and perhaps an expert might be able to deal with more significant pain. But let's look deeper into this. While you probably won't ever be in a position where you'll be setting yourself on fire, it is very likely that at some point you'll experience chronic pain. You know, the kind of pain that lasts a while and either never fully goes away or keeps coming back. Before you ask, no, you're never going to escape the sudden jolt of pain that comes from standing on a Lego brick. But you might be able to reduce other kinds of pain. Dr. Ellen Slosby, an assistant clinical professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, said that she has a bunch of tactics for controlling pain with both the mind and body combined. Like the meditators do, she said controlling your breathing might help a lot. It's simple to do, just sit down and take breaths and concentrate on those breaths. It's just you and your breathing. It's sometimes called controlled breathing. The New York Times writes that this is an ancient practice and has been proven to not only help with pain, but also to increase alertness and boost a person's immune system. Here's a snippet from that story. Consciously changing the way you breathe appears to send a signal to the brain.
As the attorney representing Adrian's trust, I'm required to read a prepared statement. Cecilia, although our relationship was far from perfect, I thought that you would talk to me rather than away. Because with his final wishes, you get $5 million. Contingent, of course, on the fine print. It can't be able to be better.
Surrender, and I will.
Listen, get your freedom back, okay? Don't let him hold you.
An expedient solution.
To be scared of him anymore. Completely in control of everything. He said wherever I went, he would find me. Walk right up to me, and I wouldn't be able to see him.
This will restore you.
I found things that came free. What I'm experiencing. You need hope. Adrian is dead. I went to his house today. He's not dead.
I have a pile of ashes in the box that would disagree with you.
He has figured out a way to be invisible.
Only thing more brilliant than inventing something that makes you invisible is coming up with the perfect way to torture you, even in death. Adrian's true genius was how he got in people's heads.
I'm not crazy.
Right now, but we can't see him.
He's listening. Where are you?
Brain to adjust the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, which can slow heart rate and digestion and promote feelings of calm, as well as the sympathetic system, which controls the release of stress hormones like cortisol. It sounds crazy, but one doctor who was interviewed said he had seen some of his patients transform by simply taking some time each day to breathe in, pause, breathe out. Okay, we know that if you didn't do that all day, you'd die, but what we're talking about is a a focused breathing here, not the unconscious kind. Countless health professionals say that this will calm you down, and if you're calm, then the emotional response to pain we discussed earlier might well be lessened. Humans can exaggerate pain by letting it control us. Pain is, painful, but we can learn to respond to it better. Pain is, of course, in the brain, and so if we understand that our brains might exaggerate pain, perhaps we can reverse that and lessen pain with these pieces of advice. You might say we need brain relief to achieve pain relief. We can look at an example of something called a nocebo, which is the opposite of a placebo. It's when someone feels something that gives them a negative impact on health, where there's nothing there. One example we found was a man that went to a hospital after stepping on a long nail. His boot was stuck on his foot, and when it was moved just a little, the man screamed out. So he was given the strong opiate fentanyl. When the painkiller had kicked in and the boot was finally removed, it turned out that the nail had gone between his toes and missed his foot completely. There was no injury at all. The pain was his own creation. We can sometimes be tricked into feeling pain, so why not the opposite? The website Pain Science writes about this, saying for every case like this, there must be hundreds more where the injury is real, but the patient is convinced that the damage is much worse than it actually is, with proportionately exaggerated pain. We don't mean to undermine anyone's pain, but many scientists tell us we interpret pain. We give it a value, if unconsciously. Have you ever arrived at the hospital and felt safer and suddenly the pain subsided somewhat? There's evidence of World War II injured soldiers feeling a little pain when pulled off the battlefield with bad injuries. In the paper, Relationship of Significance of War to Pain Experience, it's written that this might have been related to the fact that they were finally safe and away from the battlefield. Their sense of relief managed the pain somewhat. What this has to do with you and you controlling pain is simply that if you can lessen the mental anxiety while dealing with pain, it might actually result in less pain. As one researcher put it, you turn down the volume before the amplification happens. The experts tell us that mindfulness and positive thinking go a long way to helping reduce pain. People often think of the pain as a portal, like it's all over them and it will never go away. What they should do is focus on the area of the pain and then try to understand what kind of pain it is, whether a burning sensation or a throbbing sensation or something else. They should then treat it with kindness, as if they were nurturing a child in pain. Once you know the area of the pain, you can also then concentrate on a part of your body that isn't in pain. Try your hardest to focus all your attention on that area. Breathe in and breathe.
60 seconds remaining. Heroes never die. Allow me to repair the damage.
We'll hear more about his journey and incredible life and what he's done to really try to cure the world's cancer. So let's talk about his journey to medical. Starting
30 seconds remaining. Surrender to my will. This was the expected conclusion.
This is not the end.
10 seconds remaining.
Running out. Everyone get on the bench.
Building your own immune system.
Victory.
Fight disease.
Breathe out and see how long you can focus your thoughts on the non-painful part of your body. You could do this outside when the sun's shining on you. You'll feel the raised, warm parts of your body. Focusing on other stimuli other than the pain helps you manage the pain. If anything at all can distract you from your pain, then look to that pain. You might try breathing exercises, but you might also just put yourself in a position where external stimulus takes your mind off the pain. You can practice the art of being distracted. Drug addicts and their numbers have talked about how just getting up and doing something helped them to deal with the pain of withdrawal. You might already be sitting there thinking, okay, this is so new agey. The infographic show is starting to sound like some crackpot alternative health website that's selling snake oil to its viewers. That's not true. All the resources we've used so far have been from reputable institutions. Take, for example, a man named David Linden. He's a neuroscience professor at Johns Hopkins University. This is what he said about pain and the brain. The brain can say, hey, that's interesting, turn up the volume on this pain information that's coming in. Or it can say, oh no, let's turn down the volume on that and pay less attention to it. In a book he wrote, he said that when torturers did their work, they realized that the anticipation of pain really increased its impact. Our thoughts that give it pain can take it away. That's not from the Bible, that's just us sounding biblical. Like those Buddhist monks, he said that we react to pain physically and emotionally, and we need to somehow dull our emotional response to it. When we encounter pain, you might feel fear, anxiety, a sense of it never stopping. But studies have shown, for instance, one published in the American Psychologist, that dealing with these negative feelings will reduce the pain. We're not saying that by following these techniques you'll be able to sit in the road on fire and not move an inch or not make any gesture that you're in pain. But many researchers are pretty sure that by using these techniques you might have a chance of controlling your pain so it doesn't overwhelm you. We found
I don't know what I was about to do, but
tricked into feeling pain where there should be none. And also research that reveals that the
never mind.
brain
I remember it was.
feeling pain or feeling less pain.
Let's try going here
There might
though.
be lots. You never know. Maybe some of the things that today might help you. And hey, it could prevent you from hitting those painkillers. Have you tried any of the methods we've talked about? Did they work for you? Tell us in the comments. Now go watch those painful
Yes, bro. That looks so nice.
Thanks for watching. And as always,
That looks so nice.
and subscribe. See you next time.
Now traveling to Petra.
When the chips are down, how do you respond? All of us like to think that we can rise to emergency challenges, but hope to never have a moment where the extreme end of our ability is tested. Unfortunately, during what should have been a routine flight, the crew of United Airlines Flight 232 was suddenly faced with an unimaginable disaster, a scenario considered so improbable there was no formal procedure for addressing it. This is the tragic yet miraculous tale of the crash of UA Flight 232 and how the flight crew rose to the challenge and attempted to do their very best under the circumstances.
Move out.
Welcome to Oasis.
On Wednesday, July 19th, 1989, UA Flight 232 took off at 2:09 p.m. Central Time from Stapleton International Airport in Denver, Colorado. The McDonnell Douglas DC-10 jet airliner was bound for O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, with continuing service to Philadelphia International Airport. The liftoff was picture perfect. The sky was bright, cloudless blue. Soon the plane was cruising at an altitude of 37,000 feet, with the autopilot engaged. In the cockpit was veteran pilot Captain Al Haynes, with two experienced co-pilots, First Officer William Records and Second Officer Dudley Dvorak. It was a full flight with 296 souls aboard. In addition to the 3 pilots, there were 8 flight attendants and 285 passengers. Due to a Children's Day promotion where children could fly for 1 cent with the purchase of a regular adult ticket, there was an unusually high number of children on the flight, 52 to be exact. 4 of these children were lap children or children under 2 years old, and per American flight regulations could be held in the parents' arms with no seats of their own for the duration of the flight. The first half of the 2-hour flight was uneventful. Then, at 3:16 p.m., while the plane was making a right turn over Iowa, there was a loud bang in the rear. An explosion jolted the plane, causing it to shudder violently. Immediately, several freaked out passengers wondered if a bomb had gone off. On the flight deck, the pilots were bombarded with warning alarms and flashing lights. The autopilot disengaged, and Officer Records took control of the steering column. The flight instruments indicated that engine number 2 on the tail had malfunctioned. So Captain Haynes and Officer Dvorak rapidly shut it down, which stopped the plane shaking. Luckily, DC-10s are equipped with 3 engines. Engine number 1 is mounted in the front of the left wing. Engine number 2 is in tail, and engine number 3 is mounted in the front of the right wing. The plane could still fly with only 2 engines working. Captain Haynes hastily made a reassuring announcement over.
So, we all know that some foods make us gain weight, and some foods are definitely healthier than others. But what I didn't know until recently was that there are some foods that have an insanely high thermic effect, while some foods have none. And thermic
for the PA that engine number 2 had some problems, and as a result, they might be a few minutes late to O'Hare. However, as this was happening, the plane suddenly swerved hard to the right, began to roll over, the nose diving. Officer Records turned his steering column, trying to straighten out the plane, but it wouldn't respond to his commands. Captain Haynes also tried turning his steering column, but the plane still wouldn't respond. Officer Dvorak quickly realized that the gauges registering fluids for all three hydraulic systems were displaying zeros. The plane had lost all hydraulic fluid, therefore losing all conventional flight controls. The hydraulic systems on the plane control vital functions such as steering and manipulation of the flaps, ailerons, rudders, and braking systems. The DC-10's three hydraulic systems are fully independent of each other and are designed to be redundant in case of an emergency, meaning that the plane could fly with just one of the hydraulic systems working. For all three hydraulic systems to fail on a DC-10, it's a billion to one chance. Just seconds after the explosion, the plane was more or less simply sailing through the sky on an unmanageable trajectory, much like a thrown paper airplane. A single question dominated Captain Haynes' thoughts: how to keep this plane in the sky. Thankfully, the number 1 and number 3 engines on each wing appeared to be working properly. To level out the tilted plane, Captain Haynes decided to use the throttles to manipulate the remaining engines. He throttled back the power of the left engine to idle and increases the power to the maximum on the right engine. This caused the plane to yaw left and air to flow slightly faster over the right wing, generating more lift and forcing the wing down, which leveled out the plane. In the cabin, passengers were panicking. Chief Flight Attendant Jerry Brown and the rest of the flight staff
What are you doing?
keep things as calm as possible. Captain Haynes calls Brown to the deck and informed her of the situation. Back in the cabin, she thought calling a meeting with the flight attendants would scare passengers, so she surreptitiously alerted them one by one as she passed them in the aisle. As it just so happened, seated in first class was Denny Fitch, a United Airlines pilot instructor. Despite crew reassurances, he knew there was something very wrong. He let the flight attendants know his job and stated that he'd be happy to help the flight crew. At 3:29 p.m., about 15 minutes after the explosion and the loss of controls, Captain Fitch joined the flight crew in the cockpit. They explained the issue and have him go look out the cabin window to check if the ailerons are moving when they attempt to steer them. They're not. Captain Haynes has Captain Fitch take over control of the throttle for the two working engines. He maintains a white-knuckled grip on the throttle for the rest of the flight, while
Hey, check out this new guy. He seems pretty legit. Let's make an alliance and start trading right away.
Captain Haynes and Officer Records continue to manipulate the steering columns in the hopes that they can control the plane. Meanwhile, Officer Dvorak has been communicating with air traffic controllers at UAP's base in San Francisco. McDonnell Douglas, the maker of the plane, basically anyone can be get hold of. It's considered virtually impossible that all three hydraulic systems would fail on a DC-10, and there's no emergency procedure to deal with the crisis. Furthermore, no one has any real suggestions on what to do. The pilots of UA Flight 232 are on their own. Captain Haynes realizes the best course of action is to make an emergency landing as soon as possible. They decide on the small regional airport of Sioux City, some 65 miles away. Captain Haynes informs Senior Flight Attendant Brown and makes an announcement over the PA, telling passengers to prepare for a crash landing. In addition to the plane constantly skewing right and trying to roll over, the plane's doing what's called an aviation turbulent cycle. Basically, it's acting like a ship going over heavy waves. It pitches and climbs, then pitches down and descends, while speeding up and slowing down as it goes downhill and uphill. With each iteration of the cycle, the aircraft loses approximately 1,500 feet of altitude. In the cabin, Brown and the other flight attendants go row by row checking seatbelts, making sure that all passengers know what to do. Per United Airlines rules, the parents of lap children are told to place the babies on the floor, and when bending in the brace for impact position, hold them in place. In the cockpit, the four pilots worriedly discuss whether to try to use the landing gear or land the plane on its belly. Landing gear is controlled by hydraulics. However, on a DC-10, when the landing gear doors are open, gravity will make the landing gear fall out and lock into place. Also, there's a lever for activating the landing gear, which also unlocks the outboard ailerons. They hope that when the landing gear is in place, some residual hydraulic fluid will flow back into the proper system, and they'll be able to steer the plane. On the other hand, the pilots have been managing to keep the plane in the air through throttle usage. Trying to utilize the landing gear could cause a whole new set of problems. At around 3:49, some 30 minutes after the initial explosion, the pilots use the lever to open the landing gear doors. Luckily, the landing gear drops, locks into place, and doesn't cause other issues. The landing gear actually somewhat increases the stability of the flight, although it doesn't push any trapped hydraulic fluid to the controls. Meanwhile, in Sioux City, the airport's been preparing for a crash landing with ambulances, fire trucks, and volunteers. Fortuitously, 2 Sioux City hospitals, one of them a regional burn center, are in the midst of a shift change. This means more people are available to treat survivors. For the last as much fuel as they can to make the plane, which weighed some 3,600,000 pounds, including passengers and luggage, landed before attempting to land. The plan is to land on runway number 31, which at 9,000 feet long is the longest runway at the airport. But Flight 232 comes out of a turn lined up with closed runway number 22, which unfortunately is where...
Listen up, the soap you shower with? You probably haven't even questioned what bar soap you lather up with. Let's face it,
there is no
where
obligation.
all the emergency services vehicles have been parked.
Napis bahkan
Worried about keeping the plane in the air, they decide not to make another approach and warn air traffic control that they'd land on the shorter 6,600-foot runway number 22. Just minutes before the plane touches down, emergency services scramble to move their vehicles. Flight 232 would be landing at a high rate of speed, with the loss of hydraulics and flaps couldn't be extended, which meant flight crew would be unable to control both the airspeed and sink rate. Another huge problem is that hydraulics also control the braking system for the plane. At the edge of runway 22 was a cornfield. They hoped that as the plane touched down, it could roll into the cornfield and that would help slow it. On the final descent, Flight 232
What are you doing?
and falling out of the sky at 1,850
Wait, really?
400 kilometers an hour forward and 34 kilometers an hour downward speed. This is over twice the speed of a normal safe landing. In the cockpit, alarms sound for the ground proximity warning. The cabin is utterly silent as the flight attendants shout for passengers to brace for landing. At 4 p.m., the right wing of the wobbling plane struck the ground, spilling 10,000 pounds of kerosene and pushed into the plane on impact. The plane of steel hitting the runway reverberated through the cabin as the plane bounced and skidded forward. The plane broke into 3 main pieces as it careened down the runway and skidded into the cornfield. The cockpit went one way, the tail another, and the main center of the aircraft slid sideways, rolled onto its back, and came to a stop upside down in the cornfield. Passengers are tossed about, some still strapped in their seats. Due to a rush of fuel tank, a huge 4-inch fireball rolls through the cabin. Survivors
Mercy's taking care of.
burning plane as first responders rush to the chaotic scene. It took rescuers almost 30 minutes to identify the debris that was the remains of the cockpit. It had burrowed into the ground due to force. It took forklift and cutting equipment to free the 4 alive but injured pilots. Captain Haynes was knocked out upon impact. He had a severe concussion and received 90 stitches. The wreck of Flight 232 burned for 2 hours. 34 ambulances and 9 helicopters transported the injured. Of the 296 people on board, 111 died, while 185 or 62.5% of the passengers survived. 125 passengers suffered only minor injuries, and 13 actually walked away unharmed. 11 children, including 1 lab child, died. 35 passengers survived the crash, only to pass away of smoke inhalation while trying to escape from the wreckage. Only a single crew member died, Flight Attendant Renee LeBeau. The tragedy was the 5th deadliest crash involving the DC-10. A long and complex investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, eventually revealed the cause of the tragedy. An infinitesimal flaw was created when the titanium fan disc for the plane tail engine was manufactured due to impurities in the metal melting process. Over 18 years of plane usage, stress on the flaw in the fan disc caused it to form a crack. Slowly, the crack grew larger and larger, and on Flight 232, at 3:16 p.m., the fan disc fractured, causing engine number 2 to explosively disintegrate. In a stroke of pure bad luck, shrapnel perforated the lines to all 3 hydraulic systems, which ran through the horizontal stabilizer in the tail, causing them to leak all the hydraulic fluid. Though the plane had undergone regular maintenance, the crack in the fan disc wasn't noted, although it had eventually grown big enough to be seen with the naked eye. Despite the loss of life, Flight 232 is held up as a model of CRM, or crew resource management, and studied in flight school. The number of deaths could have been far greater. Both the cockpit and flight attendant crews communicated well with one another and tried to keep cool under pressure. Though Captain Haynes was in charge, he actively listened to his co-pilots. In addition to expertise, cooperation and teamwork played a vital role in troubleshooting the unfolding problem and landing the plane. Once recuperated and cleared of any blame, the 4 pilots returned to work for United Airlines in May of...
When it comes to burning fat and burning metals for a guy, the biggest mistake that you can make is just eating healthy. Why? Because there are a ton of different healthy foods more muscular than I ever have been. And I've been telling my male clients, and we're getting thousands of guys who are in better shape than they've ever been in. And so I made a free video presentation showing you what these foods are and why to cut them out of your diet immediately so that you can actually start getting real results. So if you want to check it out, hit that link below, watch my free video, and hopefully this will help you as well.
This does not compute.
At Miles After Everything says, never get the buffalo strips from Cheddar's. Our buffalo sauce isn't for the faint of heart. If you can't take the heat, try the honey mustard.
In 2012, Captain Denny Fitch lost his battle with brain cancer. Captain Haynes flew for United Airlines for 35 years until his retirement in 1991. He also became a public speaker on aviation safety. Captain Al Haynes passed away in August of 2019 at the age of 87. Haunted by guilt over the death of Evan Zhao, the lap child killed during the crash, senior flight attendant Jan Brown began lobbying Congress and the FAA to introduce child safety seats on board planes across the USA. Even after retiring in 1998, Jan Brown has continued her campaign. Unfortunately, despite some industry support, to this day, airlines in the United States are still not required to provide infants under the age of 2 traveling as lap children with any forms of restraint. As a result of the crash, the manufacturing process for making titanium fan discs for planes was improved. Also, new aircraft designs have incorporated hydraulic fuses to insulate the punctured section to prevent total loss of hydraulic fluid. Though many people called Captain Haynes a hero, he didn't consider himself to be one. He praised his co-workers, saying he felt that they all simply just tried to do the best they could. Be sure to check out our other video, What Happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.
3, 2, 1. Round 1. Capture the objective.
Imagine you and some of your best buddies are traveling by plane to what you think will be a weekend to remember. Suddenly, you experience some bad turbulence, but it's nothing you haven't felt before. Then, it gets worse. The plane drops through the sky, luggage falls from above. You grab hold of the seat arm, your knuckles whiten as you do so. The next thing you know, you're freezing cold, still fastened to your chair, in a part of the plane that broke off. You crash into the earth, but miraculously, you're still alive. You don't know it yet, but you've landed in one of the most unforgiving environments known to man. There's nothing but mountains around you. No vegetation, no animals, nothing. You are at least alive, but soon you'll be hungry. It won't be long now until your friend tells you, I'm gonna eat the pilot. As unbelievable as this sounds, it's exactly what happened. This is a survivor story that eclipses all others. It's the tale of heroism and sadness, a brutal story, and one we just can't imagine being a part of. Let us start from the beginning. It's October 12th, 1972, a Thursday. Friends who play on the same rugby team from Montevideo, Uruguay, are on their way to a match in Chile. There are 45 of them on board the plane. Not only the young, strong, and fit players, but some of the team's family members, as well as some supporters, and 5 crew members. It's expensive to fly commercially to Chile, so they opted for the cheapest option, which in this case was chartering an Air Force plane. What they don't know is that this American-made Fairchild FH-227D has the nickname the Lead Sled, owing to its high weight and relatively weak engines. They'll also soon find out why it has such an atrocious safety record. All they know now is it's the cheapest way to fly over the Andes mountain range to play what will be a fun game of rugby in Santiago. That first part of the trip is cut short due to a terrible storm over the Andes, and they're forced to stop over in Mendoza, Argentina. There's a direct route to get them to Santiago from there, but the plane can't fly the 25,000 to 26,000 feet required to get over the mountains. Instead, they'll take a route that looks like a U-turn. This route will skip the highest peaks and instead find a way around them. It's now Friday the 13th, and they set off again. The atmosphere is fun. The rugby ball is being thrown around the plane. It's all laughter and games. One of the players, Nando Parado, gives his window seat up for his friend so his buddy can get a better look at the mountains. Nando has no idea that this small gesture will end up saving his life. Not long after, the turbulence starts. At first, no one takes it seriously, but then someone points out that the mountains seem to be very close to the plane, like right outside. What they don't know is the pilot and co-pilot have made a terrible mistake. They told air traffic controllers that they would reach the airport in a minute. They couldn't see much due to the clouds, and they were wrong about that minute. They were actually 11 minutes away. They were still in the mountains and hadn't reached the safe spot where they could turn right toward the airport. They descended anyway and were hit by more turbulence as they were right in the middle of mountains where the winds were chaotic. The plane was thrown around, the clouds parted, and the pilots saw a black ridge directly ahead of them. The plane attempted to pull up and accelerate, and now the passengers knew they were in trouble. The aircraft hit the ridge, tearing off the rear of the plane and sending the plane hurtling forward. They are still about 13,800 feet above sea level when they likely collided with another mountain, causing the wings to come off and losing just the front part of the fuselage. Those at the back of the plane have been thrown out to the mountain range. Some are alive in the plane, but there is no time to think. Suddenly, what's left of the plane is a snow-covered mountain. The fact that even this much of the plane survived is incredible, but what's even more incredible is what happens next. The plane begins sliding down the mountain like a sled, but somehow doesn't collide with any rocky outcrops or boulders, sliding down and down the mountain until finally it comes to a stop at 11,710 feet above sea level. Seats have been uprooted and bodies have been bashed against the front of the pilot's cabin. People are strewn everywhere, but many of the passengers have somehow survived. Some are screaming, their limbs twisted, parts of the plane stuck into them, but they're surrounded by glaciers so remote they don't even have a name. No one goes there, and there's little hope of being found. It's freezing cold, and it's hard to breathe because the air is so thin at this altitude. Of the survivors, those that are least injured begin to help the less fortunate. Some have broken bones, some are almost dead from internal injuries. Nando is in a coma and will remain in one for 3 days. Of the 45 passengers aboard the plane, 12 of them died immediately when the plane hit the mountain or fell out the back of the destroyed aircraft. Some bodies are found still strapped to their chairs, covered in snow, and not far from the crash site. The first night is brutally cold, with temperatures getting as low as negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit. The survivors huddle into the fuselage and try to block up the holes with suitcases. They all mistakenly think that a rescue operation will find them, and this will be their only night on the mountain. They could not be more wrong. What they don't realize is that the plane's white coloring means it cannot be seen from the air. 5 more people died from their injuries on that first night. Nando in his coma doesn't know that his mother is dead and his sister is dying. Both were only on the flight because Nando was told he could use the empty seats for free. Inviting them would turn out to be the biggest regret of his life. The next day, the injured are attended to, some still screaming because their legs and arms have been broken in many places. The pilot is dead. The co-pilot, who made the terrible mistake,
Bro, you really suck dick, bro.
alive. He tells the survivors that he has a handgun and asks them
Bro, I don't need my fucking abilities to kill your ass, dude.
But now they need food. At high altitudes and such cold temperatures, the body burns calories extremely fast in its attempt to stay warm. All of the luggage is searched, and while there is an endless stock of cigarettes and lots of booze, there isn't much food. In total, there are 8 chocolate bars, a tin of mussels, 3 jars of jam, a tin of almonds, and some candy and a few bottles of wine. The survivors immediately make a rationing plan. It's next to nothing for so many people, and they have no idea how long it needs to last them. They have water at the very least, being able to melt it and funnel into empty wine bottles. Days pass and more die. On the 10th day, Nando, who's now conscious, holds his sister as she dies in his arms. He would later say that he went to sleep and woke up in hell. And yet, it will get worse, because they then heard on a transistor radio they had found in the wreckage that the search for them was being called off. They knew they were alone, cold, and starving. It was at this point of extreme desperation that Nando had told a friend, "I'm going to be the pilot." In fact, a few of the survivors had been rolling the same idea over in their minds. One of them later told the media, "Our common goal was to survive, but what we lacked was food. We had long since run out of the meager pickings we found on the plane, and there was no vegetation or animal life to be found. After just a few days, we were feeling the sensation of our own bodies consuming themselves just to remain alive." They didn't see it as cannibalism. If they were to survive and see their families again, it was what they had to do. There was no choice. Eat your buddies or die. There were 27 people still alive at this point, which is a lot of mouths to feed. They started with the pilots, stripping the bodies of all the possible meat, including the organs, as their starving brains told them, "Eat more, eat everything, don't waste a bit." On day 17, disaster struck again. In the middle of the night, they heard a noise, what one of them later described as sounding like wild horses running at them. It was an avalanche. Snow burst through the hole in the plane, and the entire fuselage was packed tight. Those alive scrambled to dig for air and find their friends. 8 more died, and the rest were in the dark, buried in snow, with little air to breathe for 3 days. In again be sitting on top of the snow. The days passed, and they survived by eating more of the dead. They smoked cigarettes and went out on little exploratory missions. But after just a few hundred meters, they grew too tired. The snow was too deep, and the air too thin for their weakened state. They were also affected by snow blindness, essentially a sunburning of the eyes that comes from the sun reflecting off the snow. To fight back against their surroundings, they made makeshift snowshoes and sunglasses so they could stray farther. Even then, they were surrounded on all sides by dangerous crevasses. One of the survivors would later say, "We felt like insects trapped in the hugest forces of nature." They were right. There's almost no place on Earth where it would be harder for humans to survive. On one sojourn, they found the other part of the fuselage. Inside were batteries for the plane radio, as well as some chocolate, a little candy, and comic books. They stayed there all night, reading comics by the light of the fire pit. For a while, they had hoped that they could use the batteries, but it soon became apparent that hooking up a radio with lots of wires was not something any of them possessed to know how to do. As Nando later said, "We were very depressed." For him, the only option now was to walk right out of the mountains. They were aware that Chile was west and remembered that the pilot had said they weren't far away from their destination, but they had no way of knowing that they were still 37 miles from the nearest road. But that wouldn't be an easy hike. It was 37 miles of glaciers and rough terrain, and they were far from experienced outdoorsmen. But Nando knew they had to walk over the mountain range to Chile. It was their only option. They decided that they would stock up on human meat and only the strongest would go. Nando and two others named Roberto Canessa and Antonio Vicentin. On day 61, when the men set off, only 16 survivors remained alive. Some were sick, and everyone was malnourished and beaten by the elements. Before they left, a man named Carlitos Paez made them a sleeping bag with parts of the aircraft insulation sewn together with copper wire. Had they not had that, they would have surely frozen to death on their hike to freedom. It took them 3 days to climb the first mountain. Nando expected to see green valleys from the top of that mountain, but what he saw instead were more mountain ranges. Vicentin turned back and gave his food to the others. Nando and Canessa both said, "We'll die, but we'll die trying." They didn't die. They walked for days, almost passing out from exhaustion. But on day 8 of their walk, they found a river. They saw green poking through the melting snow, and most importantly, they saw a person on the other side of the river. Though they were unable to cross to the other side to meet him, they slept there that night, and the next morning the man came back. He had brought with him a piece of paper and a pen. He tied them to a rock and threw it across the river. Nando wrote on the paper, "We are survivors of the plane crash. We have no food. We cannot walk anymore. There are more of us in the mountain. Where are we?" and threw it back. The man went to find help, himself being many hours by horseback from civilization. On day 10, Nando and Canessa were finally picked up by the army, their skinny bodies carried out on the back of horses. Nando said at that point he was ready to embrace life again. Soon, helicopters would take Nando to find his friends, with the pilots asking how they could have possibly walked over such terrain without equipment. It was amazing. Their journey was tracked by professionals years later, and even with the latest equipment, they found it hard and very, very dangerous. On day 71, the first of the team was picked up, and on day 72, the rest were taken. All were suffering from various ailments, but all of those who had still been alive eventually recovered. And in fact, only one of them is not alive today. Once the newspapers had stopped cheering for the survivors, many began to ask just how they had survived so long without food. It was impossible, literally impossible. Then, a photograph taken by the rescuers came to light of a human carcass whose bones had been stripped. The survivors admitted what they had done, and many in the public turned on them, calling them cannibal savages. Nando later said that eating human flesh wasn't an easy decision. It was a last resort. He said, "We tried to eat strips of leather torn from pieces of luggage, though we knew that the chemicals they'd been treated with would do us more harm than good. We ripped open seat cushions hoping to find straw, but found only inedible upholstery foam. It was either feast on dead friends or die, and one survivor that was reluctant to turn to cannibalism actually did die. But 16 of the survivors decided that they would do whatever it took to stay alive, and because of it, they made it down off the mountain. With that in mind, would you have done the same? Tell us in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video, Cannibal Island, the real Battle Royale. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Possibly the most gruesome of human taboos, the act of cannibalism has never been socially acceptable in most places. That's not to say humans haven't eaten each other at times. Archaic Pacific Islands have also practiced cannibalism, and eating
compartments of human thigh was a moral dilemma, unlike it may have been for certain serial killers. Today, we'll show you a truly shocking tale of cannibalism in this episode of the infographic show, Cannibal Island, the real battle royale. This island, called in a French documentary, L'Île au Cannibal, was indeed for a while home to a kind of Hunger Games environment. Call it what you want, but this was an historical, non-fictional battle royale. And as some historians have said, a blight on humanity, testament to how bloody cruel we can be at times. In 1933, the Soviets decided to deport around 6,000 people to a remote island in Siberia. That was Nazino Island, a place where criminals and political prisoners were not going to escape from. Under the paranoid leader Joseph Stalin, these folks were shipped off and abandoned with nothing much more than the clothes on their back, a few tools, and flour. Those that refused to make the move were shot, while millions of people that Stalin saw as a threat to the Communist Party, or who had committed crimes, were sent to many parts of Siberia. The thousands sent to this wild island were perhaps the most unfortunate victims. Not only were they only given a few kilos of flour each, but they weren't even given cooking utensils or other foodstuffs. Guards went along too, and it was thought the prisoners would be able to somehow survive. But imagine being dropped off on a tiny island no longer than 2 miles long and 1,800 feet across, with thousands of other desperate people. The island wasn't home to many animals or much edible vegetation. What would you do? You might well fight for the flour that you've been given. Instead, the prisoners quickly ran out of flour, and when authorities sent over another batch, the people were so hungry they fought tooth and nail to get it, during which time many prisoners were just shot dead. It's also said the guards of the island would keep the flour for themselves, and if you wanted some, you had to pay in some way. You can only imagine what favors were demanded by these abusers of power. But even if you had flour, you had nothing you could do with it except mix it with river water. That's what many people did, and soon prisoners fell gravely ill with dysentery. Things went from bad to worse. With many prisoners left to die, they formed gangs on the island with a plan to take what they could from others. It was anarchy. It was hell, the nadir of human depravity. We should add there that some doctors were sent to the island when things got really bad. But it's said that even they feared for their lives. Power ruled, and the guards, it said, established a reign of terror. They killed you if you tried to escape, and they might kill you if you were caught stealing. Some people on the island did have some valuables on them, such as their rings, their gold teeth, and some money. They could use this to bargain with, but it said much of the time if you had something of value, you got killed for it. Murder became commonplace as hungry men, there were far fewer women, battled to survive. But murder was not the final act. The consumption of the corpse was, in some cases. Human meat was better than starving to death, and in terms of nutrition, a lot better than dirty water mixed with flour. One of the few survivors of Death Island later talked about one thing he witnessed. He said one day a young guard called Kostya had left a girl he had been staying with, just for a short time as he had to go somewhere. This was what happened to her according to that witness. People caught the girl, tied her to a poplar tree, cut off her breasts, her muscles, everything they could eat. Everything. They were hungry. They had to eat. When Kostya came back, she was still alive. He tried to save her, but she had lost too much blood. You must understand, this all happened in a very short period of time. Most of the prisoners were dropped off on May 18th. Another 1,200 arrived May 27th. Within a couple of weeks, 70 people had died. 5 of them had been someone's breakfast, lunch, or dinner. You might be thinking that people could survive longer without food, but there is no doubt they were already malnourished. 27 people didn't even survive the trip to the island from the nearest city of Tomsk. Within a month, 50 people were arrested by the guards for acts of cannibalism. Out of the 6,700 people that were sent there, only 2,200 survived that one summer on the island. Of them, only 300 were in any safe state to work as their experience had taken such a toll on them. One woman, Teofila Bailina, many years later recounted a Death Island story. She had lived close to the island during the chaos. Once a woman from the island of death was brought to our house, she said. The woman was being sent to another camp after surviving Cannibal Island. She didn't exactly get off the island in one piece, as Bailina remembered. The woman was taken into the back room to spend the night, and I saw that her calves had been cut off. Shocked, she asked what happened. The prisoner replied, "They did that to me on the island of death. Cut them off and cooked them." You can actually find documents in the Tomsk Museum, transcriptions of interrogations of prisoners at the gulags. One prisoner was asked, ever ate human meat while on the island? No, he replied. Hearts and livers. The same man told his interrogators that in some cases, killing people already half dead from starvation was better than leaving them to suffer. I picked those that were not quite living, but not quite dead, he said, adding that once they were finished off, they were cut up and pieces of them were cooked over an open fire. Speared kidneys like human marshmallows, tickled by the tips of the raging flames. Imagine doing that and peering over the fire at your friend, himself cooking a part of a dead person's organ. We know what happened there only because one man called Vasily Velichko, a communist himself, decided he had to be investigated. He started his investigation shortly after the last people had been taken off the island, but his report was kept top secret until it was released in 1994. For his efforts, which embarrassed the communist government at the time, Velichko was excommunicated from the Communist Party. He went on to write books and was a correspondent during World War II. The tragedy has not been forgotten by some Russian people, and each year a group of people lay a wreath on the island to commemorate that summer of blood. Even today, people in Russia will refer to the place as Death Island. Let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video called What to Do If There's a Thief. See you next time.
Justice reigns from above. Surrender.
You ever had that nightmare where you're naked and everyone's laughing at you? Well, for mountain man John Coulter, that dream was real. The hot summer sun beat down on his unmentionable places as a crowd of Blackfoot Indians made crude gestures and taunted him. He'd already killed his partner, and now a group of leaders were deciding his fate. Suddenly, an elder grabbed Coulter's arm and led him away. "Go," said the elder, pointing at the prairie. "Run!" Confused, Coulter staggered forward and then glanced back. The Blackfoot warriors were stretching, limbering up. That's when Coulter realized he was running for his life. Late in the summer of 1809, John Coulter and John Potts left Fort Raymond, also known as Fort Manuel, and entered into Blackfoot territory near where the Gallatin, Jefferson, and Madison rivers meet. Today, this area is known as Three Forks, Montana. The two men were skilled hunters and planned to trap beavers. They had met a few years before when they'd been members of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Coulter and Potts knew that poaching in Blackfoot territory was extremely dangerous, but a good price was being paid for beaver pelts, so they tried to keep their presence on the down low. They set out beaver traps at night, checked them in the early morning, and slept during midday. The two men were each paddling a small dugout canoe up the Jefferson River when they heard a stamping noise. Coulter worried that it was Blackfoot Indians and wanted to turn back, but Potts insisted the noise was buffalo and accused Coulter of cowardice. For the rest of Potts' very short, miserable life, he wished he had listened to Coulter. They paddled around a bend to see that the banks of the river were lined with around 800 Blackfoot, some on horses. The tribe gestured for them to come ashore. Coulter thought it was best to comply. Trying to escape was futile. He furtively cut the lines for his beaver trapping gear, letting it drift to the shallow bottom of the river. He told Potts that he could retrieve it later. Coulter went ashore. He spoke rudimentary Blackfoot and also a little crow, the language of the neighboring Indian tribe. He thought that he and Potts were just going to be robbed. The Blackfoot took Coulter's gear, his rifle, flint, powder horn, and his knife. Then they made him strip. Off came Coulter's shirt, belt, pants, and boots. Soon he was as naked as the day he was born. Meanwhile, Potts stood in his canoe, long rifle in hand, watching the proceedings and refusing to come ashore. The Blackfoot communicated to Coulter that he should tell Potts to come ashore. Coulter told Potts, but Potts refused, saying that he might as well lose his life rather than be stripped and robbed like Coulter. Prophetic words. An archer on the shore shot Potts in the hip with an arrow. Potts fell to the bottom of his boat. Coulter asked if he was hurt. Potts said, yes, he was hurt, too injured to escape. As he rose up from the bottom of his canoe, poised for action, Potts told Coulter to get away if he could. He was going to shoot at least one Indian. Potts fired, killing one Blackfoot. All hell broke loose. A volley of arrows were unleashed at Potts, and in seconds he was dead, riddled with arrows and bullets. Blackfoot jumped in the river and dragged Potts' boat to shore. Raging, they tossed his corpse on the ground. They mutilated his body, hacking it apart with tomahawks and knives. Coulter stood by, head turned away so he didn't see. Some accounts claim that the Blackfoot threw Potts' entrails into Coulter's face to goad him. Either way, soon all that was left of Potts was a bloody, pulpy mess on the ground. An angry warrior came at Coulter with a tomahawk. But But his tribesmen grabbed him and held him back. A group of leaders and elders quickly convened to decide what to do with Coulter. Meanwhile, Coulter stood there in his birthday suit, being harassed by the mob. He was sweating, trying to keep a cool head while dreading what was going to happen next. Would the Blackfoot torture him before they killed him? An elder left the council, came over to Coulter, grabbed his arm, and began to walk him away from the crowd. The elder pointed at the prairie. Go away, he told Coulter and Crow. Coulter walked a few steps forward on shaky legs. He thought that the tribe was going to shoot him in the back. The elder impatiently gestured and demanded Coulter go faster. Coulter walked a little faster. When he got maybe 100 yards away, he glanced back to see that the young men of the tribe were stripping off their leggings and stretching. That's when Coulter understood. They were the hunters, and he was the prey. He was running for his life. His heart pounding, Coulter took off, running as fast as he could. Seconds later, blood-curdling cries went up as the Blackfoot came chasing after Coulter. Coulter was fleet of foot, he was in good shape, and adrenaline coursed through his body. But every step was painful. The prairie was treacherous. Large swaths of prickly pear bush covered the ground. The tiny spikes from their stickers pierced the tender skin between Coulter's toes. Pebbles tripped him and also bit into his feet. Shrubs scratched and left welts on his calves as he charged through them. Thankfully, Coulter knew the area. He was about 5 miles from the Madison River. If he could just make it there. Coulter ran and ran, not daring to look back. Startled birds flew up from the grass as he bolted past. He could hear war whoops and laughter carrying on the breeze. Also, footsteps. He wasn't sure if the Blackfoot were close on his tail or if it was just the imagination of his terrified mind. Finally, Coulter couldn't bear it any longer. He was out of breath. He had a stitch in his side. His nose had started to bleed from the extreme exertion. Slowing down, he looked back. Coulter had run perhaps 3 miles. Most of the hunters had lost steam and were distant specks on the prairie. However, one graceful runner draped in a blanket and carrying a spear was far ahead of the rest of the pack, maybe around 100 yards behind Coulter. The distance between them was just shy of an American football field. Coulter took off again. The Blackfoot hunter chased him for another mile, slowly gaining ground, getting closer and closer. Heart racing, lungs burning, ears ringing, Coulter could run no more. He stopped and whirled around, arms spread wide, panting, his feet shredded and his nose gushing blood. Coulter pleaded for his life in Crow. The exhausted warrior didn't hear Coulter or didn't care. He ran closer and then lunged at Coulter with his spear, but stumbled and fell, breaking his spear in two. The tables were turned. Suddenly it was the Blackfoot warrior on the ground begging for mercy. Coulter snatched up the half of the spear that had the sharp head and impaled the warrior, pinning him to the ground. Coulter worked the broken spear free of the dying man and stole his blanket. Buoyed by a fresh wave of energy, Coulter turned and ran for the river, which was about a mile away. Coulter gained a little extra time as the Blackfoot stopped to check on their fallen tribesmen. The discovery of their comrade's death sent the Indians into new paroxysms of rage and grief. At the bank of the Madison River, Coulter paused to catch his breath and scan the area. Slightly downstream, he noticed a huge beaver lodge with a mound of brush, sticks, and river debris rising from the water. Coulter plunged into the river, and golly, it was cold. The water came from snowpack melting further upstream. At least it numbed his swollen, bloody feet. Coulter swam to the beaver lodge and dived down to come up onto the wall and enter it. Beaver are clever animals, good at construction. Their lodges are often multi-roofed and 2-story. The interior made watertight by an intricate weave of twigs, grass, and mud. Coulter secreted himself on the dry second level of the ledge. Just in time, the Blackfoot splashed into the river, searching for Coulter. They stood atop the beaver mound, poked spears into it, and argued about which way Coulter went. Coulter lay inches under them, scarcely breathing, worried that the hunters would fall through or set his hiding place on fire. Thankfully, they didn't. Instead, the Blackfoot spread out to comb the area. Several men crossed to the opposite bank to look for him on the other side of the river. Coulter stayed in his hiding place, terrified that they had left someone on watch. The main pack of hunters came back 2 hours later, angry, having not seen hide nor hair of Coulter on the far side of the river. Finally, the Blackfoot left, returning to their tribe. A shivering Coulter decided to play it safe and stayed put until dark. Then he finally left the beaver lodge and swam many miles downstream. Finally, Coulter emerged from the water, chilled to the bone. All he had was the sharp end of a broken spear and a sodden blanket. No food, no clothing, and no gear. He was hundreds of miles from the nearest fort. Worse yet, an angry Blackfoot tribe was probably monitoring the nearby mountain pass. Sure, going through Bozeman Pass and following the Yellowstone River was the quickest route back to Fort Raymond. However, that route would take Coulter through the heart of Blackfoot country. He didn't want to chance it. Coulter took a long detour, which added probably 100 miles to his journey, but it was far safer. Coulter walked about 30 miles east toward the Bridger Mountains. To get over the mountain, he climbed a near vertical peak. Hiking through the snow-capped peaks at the top of the mountains was especially hard, as he had only his alone blanket to stay warm. Once over the mountains, Coulter walked across the Great Plains and then through the Montana wilderness. Berries, bark, and roots known as prairie turnips, dug up with his hands and the spear point. 11 days and some 300 miles later, Coulter finally arrived back to Fort Raymond. He was naked, sunburned, covered in insect bites, and emaciated. His feet were swollen and blistered, his eyes were glassy, and his beard long and scraggly. Close companions didn't even recognize him. Coulter spent several weeks recuperating from his narrow escape and arduous journey home. Later that winter, Coulter, who was brave, foolish, or insane, or perhaps a bit of all three, headed back into Blackfoot territory. He wanted to retrieve his expensive beaver trapping gear, which he had dropped into the river on that terrible summer's day he ended up being hunted. Since it was the dead of winter, Coulter figured he'd be okay. He thought that the Blackfoot would be hunkered down in their camps until spring. Coulter traveled through the Bozeman Pass and reached the Gallatin River. One evening, he was settling down to a nice meal of boiled buffalo meat by a small campfire when his sharp hunter's ears detected the telltale sound of twig snapping. Operating on instinct honed from years of living in the wilderness, Coulter dove down atop his fire, extinguishing it. Muskets cracked and musket balls whined over Coulter's head as he lay in the darkness. Finally, Coulter had enough. He hastily packed up and went back to Fort Raymond. Eventually, he to buy a farm, settle down, and get married. Do you think you could run 5 miles and escape if someone was chasing you? Let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video, Man Who Hunted Humans as... We've all seen fictionalized accounts in movies or on TV, in which humans become the prey for other humans. It was slightly changed in the movie Predator, where the hunter was an alien blood sport enthusiast. You could say the genre kicked off with a short story made into a film called The Most Dangerous Game, and that evolved into the dystopian deathmatch thriller The Hunger Games. What you might not know is that this type of bloodlust has happened in the real world, and there are some people that believe we'll see it again. Yep, perhaps one day you might find yourself unwillingly forced to play Fortnite Reality Battle Royale. Before we get into the reality of human hunting in the past, let's first have a look at the paper written by an English professor called Hunting Humans, a Future for Tourism in 2200. You are likely thinking this prediction of tourism in the future is implausible, unrealistic, downright fantastical. The writer of the paper, however, takes the possibility quite seriously. He tells us that when you put together the constituents of a perfect storm of natural resource depletion, environmental damage, natural disasters, widespread poverty, and a number of untouchable global elites, a future pastime for those with all the power might be to start hunting those at the bottom of the hierarchy. He writes in the year 2200, death and hunting humans will form a part of the tourism entertainment industry and a practice carried out by the wealthy elite. A view backed with substance. He says that we'll devolve toward being excited by spectacles of gore and become desensitized to human atrocities. And in this wild world, our form of entertainment will become extreme beyond what we can imagine now. But if we look back at the past, humans hunting humans as a spectacle for entertainment is not that far-fetched. We're not saying, as the academic says, in that we'll rewind our enlightened and reasoned minds and once again become attracted to or accepting of gruesome violence. But we might wonder just how bad we could get if our very world was changed around us, and many people lived in desperate circumstances. The writer seems to think that with the right, well, wrong conditions, our morality might dissolve, and as we desperately eke out survival, we'll become less empathetic with others' struggles, or even begin to enjoy watching others suffer. Meanwhile, the...
Gotcha. Apagando las luces. And stay down.
Those at the top of the pile seem to enjoy an almost psychopathic form of tourism entertainment. What could emerge, says the writer, might be something similar to the horrific blood sports that happened in the Roman Colosseum. Crowds might jeer and cheer at sights of blood, just as crowds did.
Ahorita regreso. Beacon in place. extrañaste? I'm out of here. Always leave yourself a backup. See you later. I might need this later.
So Wolfie, you feeling any better? Nope, I thought there would be no better medicine, no better cure, no better remedy than the elixir of life itself. That is BFN. Is you always have such a great time on this game, and no matter how down you are, it always cheers you up. Oh, he's got Team Wolfie on. I almost don't want to kill him. It would feel so wrong to kill a fellow brother. He's quite happy to kill me, though. Okay, I didn't even see who was there or what or when or how. I am just flying blind. Got no idea what I'm doing. Wait to make yourself a free target. Oh. Nice. Overt Starfish 37. I would make fun of that game attack, but I don't know what the word overt means, so it could actually make sense for all I know. Oh yeah, we're playing Boss Team Vanquish, by the way. That's back on. I mean, it can't be as bad as Get Off My Lawnathon with a speed boost, right? Yeah, in hindsight, that probably wasn't the best play. Yeah, let's go charging into the 5 bumming zombies in their turret. 11 out of 10 idea. What now? Okay, get that off in time. Am I getting healthier yet? Because I feel like this really is helping me. Oh boy. Oh boy. Engineer. Got him. I seriously overheated, and now he's gone in out of fight. Are you fucking me? Sucks to be you. Got two.
I want something else. Because the thing is like really poor. Like you had us, nigga.
Hello and welcome to PlayStation Grenade. It's been 2 weeks since our last meetup to go over all the Fortnite Battle Royale map updates. Let's jump in right now and put that right. Like usual, sit your butt down and relax for between 5 and 10 minutes. Slap code Adamaru in the shop to support this series, and let's relive Christmas and New Year in Fortnite Chapter 2. We're starting with the big event, the New Year's event. Well, it's more of a mini event, which happened every single hour for a whole day. So you probably watched it, but if you missed it because you have a real life, don't worry, I've got your back. I have no life. Here's what you missed.
has given us a gift to open every single day. From Han Solo's Millennium Falcon to an ice woolly mammoth outfit. Did you notice though that the items are slowly filling up the lodge? Here's what it looked like before and after. It's these little touches, which are damn awesome.
Nope, I thought there would be no better medicine, no better cure, no better remedy than the elixir of life itself. That is BFN. Because you always have such a great time on this game, and no matter how down you are, it always cheers you up. Oh, he's got Team Wolfie on. I almost don't want to kill him. It would feel so wrong to kill a fellow brother.
Were you a fan of this? I'll be looking in the comments to see if
he's quite happy to kill me though.
In Fortnite Battle Royale. On Christmas Day,
I didn't even see
I'm gonna end the stream because I'm gonna stop playing. Share videos so I can get more subscribers. And I can reach my goal of actually this becoming my job. I hope I can do better. I don't know.